If you're new with us, we're in a message series. It's called Mastermind. We're talking about the power of our thoughts. How many of you would say God is renewing your thoughts? God is renewing your thoughts. Now, we understand that the mind is so powerful. What comes into your mind tends to come out in your life. Your thoughts matter. It's impossible to live a positive life when our thoughts are consumed with negative thinking. In fact, last week we talked about the reality. If we can't learn to control what we think, it's very hard to control what we do. Our thoughts matter. In this message series, we've been looking at the mind and teaching of the Apostle Paul. He understood just how important the thoughts were. In fact, our key verse, I want to review it again, is from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3, 4, and 5. Paul says this. He says, "For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of this world. On the contrary, our heavenly weapons, they have divine power to demolish strongholds." What is a stronghold? It's a wrong pattern of thinking. It demolishes these strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. How do we do this? We do it by taking every thought captive and we make it obedient to Christ. Why did Paul talk so much about the power of our thoughts? He understood this principle, that your life will always move in the direction of your strongest thoughts. Our thoughts matter. If you've been with us in past weeks, we talked a little bit about neural pathways. What is a neural pathway? Well, what we know now about the brain is much more than we knew decades ago. We know that the brain is not fixed. The brain is ever evolving. It's like a computer that rewires itself as we think thoughts or experience experiences. And neural pathways, once we think a thought, our brain creates a pathway and it's easier to think that thought again. If we're thinking positive thoughts, this is really good. If we're thinking on truth, it's good because it's easier to think truth. The problem is, many of us, is we are believing things that are untrue, and therefore it's easier for our brains to continue to travel those pathways. We're learning to renew our minds. Today I want to add another vocabulary word or thought to our discussion on the brain. I want to talk to you today about cognitive biases. Everybody say cognitive biases. What is that? Another term for a cognitive bias would be a mental filter, or we might even say a mental framework. What is a cognitive bias? If you're taking notes, a simple definition would be this. A cognitive bias is a mistake in reasoning based on personal preferences or beliefs. It's a personal belief, preference, or idea that something may be true even though it's not true, and so we often make a mistake in reasoning or judgment. It's a mental filter that impacts how you think. For example, Amy got some new sunglasses. She put her glasses on. She looked up at the sky, and she's like, "Oh my gosh, I've never seen so many different colors in the sky." Then she looked at me, and she said, "You look horrible. Your face looks so discolored. What's wrong with you? I don't know why you look this way." I said, "Take off your glasses." She said, "Oh, you look good again." I said, "Oh, yes, I do. Do you want to tell me that some more and see what happens if you do?" What happened? She had filters on that changed the view, her perspective of things. What happens is we have mental filters or mental biases or mental shades that impact how we see and how we think. Many of us, all of us have default filters. When things get difficult or we're in a squeeze, our brain defaults to the cognitive biases, that which we believe is true, although it may not be true. And that's why different people respond differently to the same situation. Have you ever noticed this? Two different people can be in the exact same situation and respond in very different ways. It's not the facts that are different. What's different? It's the filter. Let me say it again. It's not the facts that are different. It's the filter. It's in the way in which someone perceives the information. For example, you may be in your workplace, and a boss may give feedback to two different employees. The first employee receives the feedback and says, "Who does he think he is? That's just unfair. I just can't. He's so judgmental. I mean, let me give him some feedback and see how he feels about that." They're defensive, they're negative, their perception is bad. The next person receives the very same type of feedback, done in the very same spirit. It's like, "Thank you so much. That was so helpful. I can tell you care about me and you want me to get better." It's not the facts that are different. What is it? It's the filter. And this is so true when it comes to the things of God. There are those of you who grew up and you've been told Christians are all hypocrites. Church people are all whatever. Mega churches are so whatever. And when you walk into the church, because of filters, you already have a predetermined idea that you aren't going to like what you see. Therefore, you're biased against it because of your filter. Someone else might grow up thinking, yeah, Christians aren't perfect, but there's the grace of God, and God is working in so many different ways. And you walk into a church and you see good things because your filter is different. It's not the facts, it's the filter. In fact, even all the way down to your relationship with your earthly father can in many ways shape your view, right or wrong, of God. If you had an earthly dad who was full of grace and was really loving and was very involved, it may be easy for you to believe in a heavenly father who is loving, who is intimate, who is involved and cares about the details of your life. On the other hand, if you had an abusive dad, an angry dad, a violent father, a distant father, then for some people it's even difficult to call God a heavenly father. It's not the facts that are different, it's the filter. It's the filter. How we think determines so much about how we live. What comes into our mind determines what comes out in our lives. So today what I want to do is I want to talk about the second discipline that I've adopted into my life. We talked last week about meditating on truth. Today what I want to do is talk about what's called reframing. Reframing a situation. What is reframing? Very simply, reframing is creating a different way of looking at a situation, person, or relationship by changing its meaning. What is reframing? It's creating a different way of looking at something by changing its meaning. For example, there's the old story about a little boy who said, "I'm the greatest hitter who's ever lived. In terms of baseball, there's never been a batter better than I am." He stood up in his backyard, he took his baseball and took his bat, he threw the ball up in the air, he swung and he missed it. And he said, "Strike one, that doesn't matter. Everybody misses one or so every now and then. I am still the greatest hitter who's ever lived." He threw the ball up the second time, swung, and he missed it. He said, "That's okay. That's like, even with 2 strikes against me, I'm still the greatest hitter who's ever lived." He took the ball up, he threw it a third time, he swung as hard as he could, he missed again. He goes, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Not only am I the greatest batter who's ever lived, I'm also the greatest pitcher. I just struck out the greatest batter in the history of the world." What is that? It's reframing a situation. It's looking at something, taking on a different meaning by changing how we interpret the situation. Let me give you a couple of more nerdy terms of what reframing is, technical terms. It would be called perceptual accentuation. Reframing is also called cognitive restructuring. Or, if you're simple like me, it's called thinking different. No G on thinking when you say it. It's just thinking different. Let me give you an example. What kind of a day are we having? Is it a great day? Is it an average day? Is it a really bad day? The answer is the kind of day that we're having is determined by how we frame it. It's not the facts that are different, it's the filter, it's the frame. If you look at the day like this and frame it in this corner, it's a dark day, it's a stormy day, bad things are going to happen today, Bad things always happen to me. Life is bad. It's going to get worse. You can't trust people. Life's always bad. I hate this day. I hate where we're going. I can't stand these people. They're all jerks. They're all hypocrites. I don't know what's wrong. I'm good. Everybody else is bad. It's going to be a bad day. What kind of day is it? Depends on how you frame it. If you frame it like this is going to be a good day. God is working today. God is in all things. I can sense that God is going to do something. Life may not be just the way I want it, but my God is working in all things to bring about good to those who love and are called according to his purpose. What kind of day is it going to be? Well, the answer is, it depends on how you frame it. The facts aren't different. What is it? It's the filter, or it is the frame. What I hope you'll understand is that all through life, you cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how you frame it. Let me say it again. You cannot control what happens to you, but you can control how you frame it. If there was anyone in Scripture that was great at reframing, it was the Apostle Paul. In fact, as we talked about in previous weeks, one of the greatest prayer desires of his life was that God would open up a door for him to preach the gospel in Rome. He knew if he could get to Rome and reach the strategic leaders in Rome, that from that city, the gospel could spread all over the world. His one top desire is, God, open the door for me to preach the gospel in Rome. And so he gets to go to Rome, but guess what? He's not in Rome as a preacher, but he's actually in Rome as a prisoner, locked up 24 hours a day, awaiting possible execution. His highest dream before God ends up being his worst nightmare, and he doesn't get anything that he wants to do before God. Some of you, this is exactly where you are right now. You worked and worked and worked and worked, say, for the perfect degree. You got your degree, and now you're in a job that you're highly overeducated for. It's not even in the same field, and you're wondering, God, where are you? I don't understand this. This is not good, God. I did all that work, and I don't understand why I don't get to do what you called me to do. You dated your high school sweetheart. You did things that were pure and honest. You got married, and your high school sweetheart turned into the devil. You're divorced now. You're wondering what happened, God. This isn't fair. This is what I wanted, and I got the opposite thing. This is the worst thing ever. God, by this point in life, I just thought life would be different. It would somehow be better. I wouldn't be here. God, I don't understand. Where are you? Paul is a prisoner in Rome where he wanted to be free to preach. Let me show you what he could have said. Everybody say could have said. This is what he could have said. It's taken from Philippians chapter 1, verses 12 and 13 in the NWV. The NWV stands for the New Winer's Version of the Bible. This is what Paul could have. Somebody say could have. This is what Paul could have said. He could have said, now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me really sucks. As a result of the hell I've been through, I'm quitting life group and never going back to church. That's the New Winer's Version. Now, let me just tell you, for some of you who may be new Christians, there is no such thing as the New Winer's Version. Some may be whining because you can't find that version in your YouVersion Bible app. Where's the new version? It's not even there. It's not even there. It's not there. It's not real. This is what Paul really said. Philippians 1, 12 and 13. He said, now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. In other words, what most people would say is a really, really bad thing is actually a really, really good thing. He says, as a result of me being locked up, it has become clear through the whole palace guard and to everyone else, I'm in chains for Christ. What many people say is bad, you're locked up in prison, you're awaiting possible execution, it's really bad, and the guards stink because they don't have deodorant in this time of day. What would look really, really bad, you don't understand, is I am strategically chained up to Roman soldiers, some of the top leaders in Rome, and I get a new one every 8 hours. People think I'm the real prisoner, but they have no idea The guard is a prisoner to my 8-hour sermon, and I get to give a new sermon every 8 hours to a different. This is the worst thing ever. No. What you don't understand is, with my God, this is actually a really good thing. Let me see the next verse, if you don't mind. This is what Paul says. Because of my chains, brothers and sisters, but most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord, and they dare to proclaim the gospel without fear. Because I'm locked up in here, many people would say it's bad, but you know what? It's stirring up the faith within the people of God who are becoming even more passionate about spreading the gospel. What has happened to me, many would say, is bad. But if you look at it through a different lens with a different filter, it's not the facts that changed, it's the frame. It's the filter that's changed. What's happened to me is actually served to advance the gospel. Somebody say it's not the facts, it's the filter. How do we reframe our experiences, our story, and our relationship? What I want to do is I want to give you 3 different tools, and this is, again, what I've been doing in my life. And my wife, Amy, will tell you that I'm making some progress, and she would tell you I've got a long ways to go. If you feel like you got a ways to go, we've all got a long ways to go, okay? 3 different things. The first thing is you can do is this. You can thank God for what didn't happen. Whenever something is not where you'd want it to be, you can recognize that it could be a lot worse, and you can thank God for what didn't happen. In fact, I like the story of this girl in college who called her mom and dad and said, I need to come meet with you. She said, you need to sit down, Mom and Dad. She said, this is hard for me to tell you, but I went out to a bar, and I met a guy, and we had a few drinks, and we left, and we went out someplace, and I'm now pregnant with twins. The good news is that his probation will be over in a year, and once he's out of rehab, he's going to look for work. He talked about marrying me, but since he's unemployed, he's just going to move in with me until then, and we believe that God's going to work this out over time. Then she said, Mom and Dad, none of that's true. What's true is I got a D in chemistry. I just wanted you to know it could be a lot worse. Every now and then, you want to thank God for what didn't happen. I didn't get my project turned in time, so I'm not going to get the bonus. I thank God I'm still employed and I didn't lose my job. Here's one for me, is my airplane got delayed. Anybody ever almost lose your salvation over that? Am I the only, borderline, demon-possessed person when that happens? It's the worst thing ever! It's the worst thing ever! I'm going to tweet about American Airlines, whatever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, I would rather be down here wanting to be up there than be up there on a bad plane wanting to be down there. I'm going to thank God for what didn't happen. Every now and then, we need to have some perspective. We get upset about things that are not that big of a deal. Let God reframe your perspective. Now, there are some things that you're going to battle in life that are real and significant issues. And at that point, you want to deal with it and make wise decisions and get good counsel. But so often, it's the things that aren't that big of a deal that throw us off when a little different perspective could completely change the outcome of how we're doing things. We thank God for what didn't happen. The second thing that I like to do is this. I like to practice pre-framing. Practice pre-framing, selecting the frame before the event. What do we know about our thoughts or our frames? Our thoughts or frames shape what we experience. If we decide ahead of time, this day is going to be horrible. These people make me crazy. I never like these events. What's going to happen is your expectation, your cognitive bias is going to lead you to an experience that you didn't have to have. It's not the facts that are different, it's the frame, it's the filter. If instead you say, you know what, I may not love these events, but I'm going with my family, and we're going to have a good time. We're going to make the best of it. Yeah, sometimes these people are kind of weird, but you know what? I'm going to show them the love of Jesus anyway. The pre-deciding the frame can make the biggest difference. I'll tell you the personal illustration that's really impacted my life to this day. Back in grade school and in high school, I played baseball. I changed sports my freshman year, had never played tennis before, barely made the team. Second year, some guys graduated. Somehow, I ended up playing #1 singles my second year to ever play. I went to the state championship. I was a nobody, unranked, unseeded, and in the quarterfinals, I was playing the #4 ranked player in the state, a guy named Mandy Ochoa, who should have cleaned my clock. Little did he know that this little scrapper had more fight in him. I had Mandy up against the wall. A crowd formed who is the sophomore who's got the senior champion on the ropes, and they were cheering for me. I was up 5-1 in the third set. I had 7 match points. What does that mean? If you win any one of those 7, the match is mine. The reason I say had is not good news. I lost all 7 and lost the match, and I had the nickname from everybody else that watched it. My name was Grochoka. If Groschel gets in a tight spot, he's going to choke. I had a coach who immediately came up to me afterwards and said, "Do not buy that label." He said, "I want you to think about it. You've been in the tightest spot of anybody, and you know better than everybody what doesn't work in a tight spot. What do most people do that doesn't work?" I said, they tighten up. They pull back. He said, "What are you going to do next time you're in a tight spot?" "I'm taking risks. I'm hitting out. I'm not holding back. I'm going to go for it." He said, "I want you to tell yourself that in tight situations, because of your experience, you are the best of the best." Guess what? Before I ever get into a situation, I pre-frame it. In tight spots, I am a high performer. If the stakes are really, really high, you want to get me the ball at the buzzer because I play great under pressure. I went on to, in college, set the school record for the most consecutive wins. How did I do it? In tight places, listen to me, I rise to the occasion and get the job done. To this day, you put me in a situation where it's tense in leadership, the stakes are high spiritually before I go in. I've chosen the frame before the event. I've chosen the frame before the event by telling myself, with God's help in me, I am great under pressure. Some of you, you've got the wrong frame. I choke. I'm no good. I never measure up. I fall apart. I can't speak 3 words consecutively that make sense in front of a cute girl. No, you change that thing. I am great with women. I've got God's power living in me. I can do all things through Christ who gives me strength to ask her out on the date and get married for the glory of God. I wasn't planning on saying that last part, but sometimes, what do? You pre-frame it. Before the event, you decide, my God is with me. God, because of his power, I'm great in this situation. You pre-frame it. What do? You thank God for what didn't happen that could have happened. You decide ahead of time what kind of frame you're going to put around it. And the third thing you do is this. You train yourself to look for God's goodness in every situation. You train yourself to look for God's goodness in every situation, because the truth is, you will find what you're looking for. You will find what you're looking for. If you want to see things to be upset about, things to be negative about, be a complainer all day long, listen, you will drift to, your eyes will see those, you'll magnify them, and you can be like the majority of the world, negative, critical, non-productive, judgmental person that just picks things apart rather than making things better. This is the society we live in. If, on the other hand, you look for the good, you watch for where God is working, you try to find the best in people, you see the hand of God working, you will have eyes to see and ears to hear where God is working, and you look for the goodness of God. It's like 2 different types of birds. You put a hummingbird and a buzzard loose over any territory. And what is the buzzard going to find? The buzzard will soar over, and every single time, the buzzard will find dead things. The buzzard will find carcasses. Why? Because that's what the buzzard is looking for. You take a hummingbird. What will a hummingbird do? In the same part of town, on the very same street, fly right by the dead thing and go straight for the sweet thing. What are you going to be? What are you going to be? You going to look for death? You going to look for darkness? You going to look for trials, problems, fault? That's what most of the world is doing. Or you're going to look for the goodness of God. You're going to look for His grace. You're going to look for His presence. You're going to look for His power, because you will find what you're looking for. So I'll tell you, in my little world, this is going to seem small, and it really is, but this is it. 5 weeks ago, my newest book, Hope in the Dark, came out. And it was available for 2 days, and it's been sold out for 3 weeks, okay? So, hey, thank you for you all. In my world, that's not good. People want it, and they can't get it. And the printers can't keep up with it, and literally people are like, they're mad. They're calling, can't get it, can't get it, can't get it, can't get it, okay? 4 weeks later, now it's available on Amazon, and it'll be available next week. Like, literally, it has not been available. Amy's like, hey, thank God people are wanting it. No, I'm in the mood to be over here. I'm mad they can't get it. Can I be real like that? I'm really frustrated. This week, everything changed for me. Rance and Heather, married couple, one child, little 4-year-old, 5-year-old named Boston, have been going through a long trial. And Heather's been sick through massive health situations and looked like she was going to pull through. At the age of 38, when Rance was outside, he came back in and found his bride unresponsive, and she didn't pull through. Worst thing ever. God is still good. 38-year-old mom dies, worst possible scenario. The presence of God is still working. Here I am in my little stupid world. Can't get the books to the people that need them. Heather died. Between her death and her funeral, a package came from something that she'd ordered weeks prior, but it wasn't available. And her husband opened up the mail, and at the exact perfect timing was a book called Hope in the Dark, Believing God is Good When Life is Not. And he laughed and he cried, and he said, all the way from heaven, my bride was looking out for me, and my God was looking out for me, and in his perfect timing, he was faithful. Can't get the books out. God is sovereign. He's perfect in every way. What do? We thank God for what didn't happen. We decide ahead of time how we're going to frame it. We look for God's goodness. Then here's what we do. We're not passively receiving circumstances. We're actively interpreting it through a spiritual filter, through a mind that's been renewed for Christ. Suddenly, we're not interpreting God through our circumstances. God isn't good because life isn't good. What we're doing is we're interpreting our circumstances through the goodness of God. And when we do that, we can be just like Paul. When most people say, this is the worst thing ever, you wanted to preach and you're locked up, he said, oh, you don't understand. When you know God the way I do, when he's working in all things, I can get rid of my default negative filters. Instead, I look through the truth of God, that what has happened to me has really served to advance the gospel. I don't know who it is here, but if you've been interpreting God through your circumstances, you may have a negative view of God. If instead you learn to interpret your circumstances to the goodness of God, a God who's always with you, who will never leave you, who will never forsake you, who's always faithful and always good, suddenly the facts may not change, but because the filter changes, everything else changes. Okay? At all of our churches, let's go to God together in prayer. Father, I know that there are many that that are hurting. And I know, God, I'm